Please put your hands together for Carolyn Carter.
Soul food. Those are the stories that my great-grandmother told me. Her name was Cassie, but we called her Granny. We used to spend summers at her house. It was called Over to the House. Don't ask me why we called it that. It was called Over to the House. We spent our summers over there. We were little. I was about 5 years old. And we would go over there and we would listen to the stories from the kitchen because everything happened in the kitchen. All the stories, all the love, all the food happened in the kitchen. She would get us around the table and she would tell us, girl, let me tell you. She told me about her husband. Her husband was a big Irishman. He was Irish and he was black. And she called him Pops. So Pops raised horses and he had all kinds of entrepreneurial spirit. And one day, his coworkers decided, we're going to take you down to the river for lunch. He was a little skeptical, and so was his daughter, so she put his gun in his lunchbox. When he got down to the river, it was a shootout. They were trying to get rid of him. But he didn't. He made it back home, but they followed him. And he had to give those men a car, a horse, and a gun to leave him alone. She told us a story about her mother. When her mother died, and the casket was in the living room. Can you imagine a casket in your living room? But she heard stories in the kitchen, because she had a cousin who was an undertaker. Remember, that's what they called them, undertakers. And he told them the story of when somebody dies, and they put nickels in your eyes to keep them shut. And all you people who spend all that money on clothes, they cut the clothes up the back. That's how they get them on the dead people. And she told us, you know what? If the man came and he had a hump in his back, they would saw it off. So he wouldn't be rocking in the casket. So when next time you go to a funeral and you're looking in the casket, look at the eyes and look at the shape of the body and see if it's steady or not. But she had so many stories that she would share with us, and we were getting older, and we were moving on, and then the stories became even more real for us. Me and my sisters used to hide under the dining room table because we wanted to hear the stories from the kitchen. And we would listen, but it wouldn't be the stories like you want to hear, because they'd be drinking and cussing and fighting and playing. And then we would listen to it. They would be drinking the wine. The same wine we'd stump in the bathtub. I don't know why we did that. But we'd stump the grapes in the bathtub, and they would drink the wine. They made homemade wine. But as she got older, the stories became more real. Then she started bringing out pictures. So she brought pictures of my great-uncle out. He was a Purple Heart war hero. He came home from the war, and he died. Well, he got killed. He was in a construction accident in building Pontiac High School. The crane came down in the hole and cut him in half. Then she told me stories about her growing up, and then when they were little, and they used to run up in the church and watch the holy rollers. I was like, what's a holy roller? The old people be at the sanctified church rolling in the sheets. And she said they'd look in the window and the kids would say, y'all kids, get out of here, run. And they would run back up to the house. But she shared so many stories for us, to me, as we were getting older. Then she told me a story about her growing up and looking pretty. She always wanted to look nice. And she told us, make sure you look good. Always get your hair done and always look good. She dyed her hair until the day she died. And if she couldn't get Lady Clairol jet black, she used black shoe polish. And her husband would say, oh, woman, you look like a chimney sweep with all that black on your body. She didn't care. She'd sit in the kitchen cooking that soul food, sweating black. She'd be sweating. She had black sweating down her face. But as we got older, and Granny got older, and they moved from Black Bottom, Detroit, till they moved around the corner from us. And I was getting older, so we didn't spend our summers over to the house anymore, but they moved around the corner from us, so we could hear the stories. I could hear the stories. So I went around to her house. Granny was getting older. June 24th, 1993, she died. She was 110 years old. But not before I got one more story. I got one more story. I got to sit at the table with Granny and her mother, her daughter, which was my mother, my grandmother, and my great-grandmother. And I got to listen to the stories. And there was something about those stories that time that made it just so crystal clear. It was if she was giving me a legacy and willing those stories to me, because she was able to talk about her 21 siblings. She only knew 13 of them because 7 of them were sold to slavery. But she was able to name all 13 of them. She kept very good records of her ancestors. She wrote everything down. She was able to talk about living in Tennessee, growing up. She started in North Carolina, Caswell County, and then the slave owner took them to Brownsville, Tennessee, Haywood County. She talked about the one-room shack that she lived in. She also talked about the land that her father owned, that he worked and paid for his freedom, and he bought it from the plantation owner, the same land that she left to her children. So the stories became so real for me. And as she went on and died to be with the ancestors, she had left me a great legacy, and that's where my journey began. That's where my journey began. I started looking and getting on the internet, and I was like, I'm going to find her. But not before I told her. I did tell her, Granny, I'm going to find your siblings. She was like, yeah, right, okay. She didn't really believe me. But I decided I'm going to look for them anyway. I got on the computer. I started looking. I was searching. I would be sometime on the computer till 4 and 5 o'clock in the morning looking for my ancestors. I was writing the courthouses and emailing them. And I came across a gentleman who ended up being a cousin. I've never met him. His name is Homer, but we converse all the time. He wrote a book about my ancestors. He sent me the book. He said, you need to talk to the slave owner's relative. I think she lives in Florida. So I said, okay, I'll call her. And I did. I called her, I told her my name, I told her who I was, and she said, you need to call my brother. He lives on the plantation. I was like, okay. I said, I can't call this man unless I get some proof. I got to get some proof. So I kept searching on the internet, and I started joining all these historical societies. I joined the Caswell County, North Carolina Society. I joined one in Haywood County, Brownsville, Tennessee, and I figured, well, if I'm searching for my ancestors, I need to get to know the plantation owner because you have to get to know him just as much as you do your own family. So I did. I was on the website called Flickr, and I was looking, and I had knew what a deed looked like because I had done research before. And there was a document that came up. And as I brought it closer to me, I stopped. It was the plantation owner's deed that listed my great-grandmother's siblings. I couldn't breathe. It was like, and I had watched shows of ancestors and people meeting their ancestors, and it was different when it was in my own backyard. To actually see this document, Homer was $350, Nancy was $250, her sister Dicey was $275, and he had left each sibling 8 slaves, and he listed them all by name in the deed. It was very painful. When you are looking for your ancestors, the closer you get to them, the more painful it is. Because our ancestors passed down the pain. They didn't always pass the good things. Stay away from Uncle so-and-so. Stay away from Aunt so-and-so. So they pass those memories on. They don't always pass on the good things. But I had a document. I had some proof. So now I'm like, okay, I'm ready. I can call this man now. So I picked up the phone, and I couldn't call him. I could not. What would I say to him? I was afraid of how he would respond to me. It took me 2 years to call that man. 2 years. I finally got to the point, I said, you know what, forget it. I'm in Detroit, he in Tennessee, what are you gonna do? So I picked up the phone and I called him. I was like, hello, my name is Carolyn, and blah, blah, blah. I got your number from your sister, Sherry. I wanted to let him know that I got the number from his sister. And so I said, I stopped and I said, forget it. I said, I think your family own mine. And he laughed. And I was like, is he laughing at me or is he laughing with me? So he said, well, my family bought this land in 1832. I'm saying to myself, if you got it in 1832, you probably stole it from the Indians, Native Americans. But I don't remember no slaves, but we had sharecroppers. I'm like, I told him, if you bought that land in 1832, you had slaves. So we went back and forth for a minute on the phone. And at the end of the conversation, he invited me to visit. I have not visited him yet, but next year I do plan to visit him. But we had continued conversations. I called him and check on him every now and then, one, just to make sure he's still alive, so when I get down there, I could visit. And I called him, the next time I called him, I said, well, if he knows about my ancestors, he knows so much about Tennessee, I'm gonna ask him about my other ancestors. So I called him, I said, well, I'm a Halliburton, I'm a Taylor, I'm a Stansfield, I'm a Strauss, he's like, wait, Halliburton? He said, Halliburton, Whiteside, those are very popular names here in Tennessee. He said, the story is that 3 Scottish brothers from Scotland came here to Tennessee, and only 2 of them had children, so all the Halliburtons in the world are related. I was like, okay, I need to call Cheney and see if I can get some Halliburton contract money. I haven't seen the fruits of that labor yet, but I took a DNA test, so I'm gonna find him. So then I told him about the Whitesides. The Whitesides are another popular family in Tennessee. My 5 times grandfather on my father's side was a slave. He was sold 4 times because he had a trade. He was a blacksmith. He was a slave in Williams County, Franklin, Tennessee. So as I gathered all of these stories and continued on this legacy and this journey of finding my ancestors and keeping my promise to Granny and to find her siblings, I was continuing to get closer and closer with the breadcrumbs that she had left me, the legacy that she had left me. And what I want to say is, first of all, I teach genealogy at Wayne County Community College District. I've been teaching for 4 years. And don't wait until your relatives are gone before you talk to them. Talk to the people in your family, the people who are still here, because once they're gone, it's like burning a library. You don't get those stories anymore. Search the children to find the adults. You have to use your uncles and your aunts and your cousins, and everyone in the family has a story. You have to talk to everyone. And learn how to spell your ancestors' names incorrectly. They didn't, a lot of our ancestors, I know mine were illiterate, maybe y'all's weren't. But they didn't know how to write, so they spelled things the way they sounded. So when you're looking for your ancestors and you can't find them, don't get hung up on the spelling of a name, because they didn't spell it that way. Talk to your ancestors, I'm telling you, because when they're gone, it's like burning a library. You cannot get those stories back. And we want to teach our children that we are not descendants from slavery. Slavery was a condition, it's not a culture. So we want to make sure we're leaving them and giving them a narrative so that they will have a rich heritage. We are all descendants from great people. I am the hopes and dreams of my ancestors, and so are you. Thank you.
Carolyn Carter.